Welcome to Directionally Correct, a P1's podcast with Cole and Scott. Today's guest, Gary Seeger, college football fanatic and host of Winning Cures Everything.
Thanks to our sponsors, One Model. One Model helps people leaders at large organizations make consistently brilliant talent decisions by unlocking the analytical value of the data dispersed across your business. One Model's people analytics platform takes all of the heavy lifting out of data extraction, cleansing, modeling, analytics, and reporting of enterprise workforce data. One Model pioneered people data orchestration and has perfected the ethical use of AI and data science for leaders who need transparent and explainable decision support systems. HR and business teams trust its accurate reports, analyses, and storytelling capabilities. Data scientists, engineers, and people analytics professionals love the combination of governance and flexibility that no other workforce insights platform can provide. To learn more, book a demo at onemodel.co/directionallycorrect. All opinions are our own and do not reflect those of any other organization. I see it as like a generational thing where there was a certain generation that you just got incentivized for speaking like very articulately.
Yeah,
And now like that you're actually incentivized for being more authentic, but some people haven't gotten the memo yet. And so it's just like, well, I guess that's what it's gonna be. But looks like Gary joined us.
I'm
Gary,
here. Finally, can you guys hear me?
got you, man.
Okay, good. Yeah, I don't know what it is about StreamYard. So I do 4 different shows each week. So I do a total of like 7 podcasts, I guess you could say, per week. And we do StreamYard, we do Streamlabs, Talk Studio, we do Zoom, and I have to use Skype for the BetUS stuff. And all of those that I mentioned, other than StreamYard, always work flawlessly. No problem. StreamYard, for whatever reason, I've got 4 different browsers on my machine so that I can switch over if StreamYard doesn't want to work on one of them. So the one that I'm using right now is the Opera GX browser.
Yeah.
And it's the one that decided to work today.
Gary's an IT guy. Like he's got his shit down.
But even the IT background does not help whenever technology does not want to cooperate, right?
Which one's the best? Like we've struggled with this and growing pains and this sort of stuff of like where to host it and like how to actually get it running. I think we've settled on StreamYard is probably the most.
It's the widest used, right? So it's the one that everybody knows. I like the Streamlabs Talk Studio.
Okay.
It just seems to flow a little bit better. You can get to all of them are pretty comparable. Riverside is really nice, but it's kind of pricey.
Yeah.
So if you're doing, professional, making good revenue, all that kind of stuff, Riverside works. But yeah, I prefer StreamYard, not StreamYard, Streamlabs.
Yeah.
They all got the same name, it feels like. But yeah, that's just a personal preference. I mean, StreamYard's fine if I can get it to work. It might just be me. Like it might just be my computer. So I need a new laptop anyway. I got this one back in 2020. I need to re-up this thing.
Never discount the human element, right?
You got that right. You got that
right. Gary, I have to admit, you got a great podcast voice and an even better studio.
Well, thank you.
I'm thrilled to have you here, man. So just to tell you a little bit about us, because I'm assuming we're not the typical one of the 7 podcasts that you do every week.
No, but that's okay. This is different, and I enjoy that, right?
Yeah. Well, we're a people analytics podcast, but I take a pretty expansive definition to include, like, let's call it sports analytics within that. And but both Scott and I are big college football fans too, and so
which is this the perfect time of year for it.
Absolutely. So I guess maybe
you got the TV going right now. Like we're about to kick off on a game.
No, not yet. So I'll pull it up here in a little bit and whatnot.
Okay.
I've got so let's see if I can explain this. I have an Apple iMac in the back over here. I've got one screen right here that is my work PC. I've got a monitor here, monitor here, iPad here. So I'm
command center.
Yeah, I am set up. But I'll have YouTube TV going here in a minute.
Yeah. Well, so winning cures everything, right?
Yes.
And because again, none of our audience is probably going to know what that is. What is it? And Bet USA, right? Is that the other
So
thing?
Bet US, but very close. That was
Yeah,
nice.
hit us with what that is real quick, and then we can just start geeking out on some of the college football stuff. But I want to just kind of tee it up.
All right. So Winning Cures Everything is just a college football podcast. It's a college football show that I do on YouTube and on a podcast version. So sometimes you get cross-secting things, but you don't always get the same stuff in the podcast feed that you get on YouTube, etc. But it's mainly just a place for me to go and rant about college football.
That's perfect.
A long I bought winningcureseverything.com back in 2012, I believe, and had a buddy of mine that we both like to talk about college football. I was in a band at the time. I just wanted somewhere that I could, blog basically where I could go type out whatever I was thinking about the sport. And in 2016, I had another friend that reached out and said, "Hey, you're not touring anymore. You're not in a band anymore. Do you want to start a podcast?" I said, "Okay, that's actually a pretty good idea." He said, "You've already got a good name for it. You've already got the website. Like, why don't we just do a Winning Cures Everything podcast and we can talk about sports betting and whatever?" And then in 2018, it kind of took off because PASPA got repealed and once everything got legalized, it was
Oh yeah.
right. So advertising deals, everybody wants to, whoever's already established in the marketplace, that's who we're going with. And, that's where things really kind of took off. The Bet US show, I don't technically, so Bet US is an offshore sports book, but I don't technically work for the sports book. I work for the media side. So BetUS TV and BetUS are two separate entities, and they're based down in Costa Rica. I've gone down there. I was not allowed in where the odds makers are and whatnot, but it is interesting because they've got that place just locked down. There is no address for it, which I found very in Costa Rica. Apparently, you can get away with that. But if you ever wanted to try and send mail or anything like that, there is no chance.
No, no. I gotta say our origin story is pretty much the same. Like Cole was in an emo band. Is like, hey, we need to start a podcast, and the rest is history.
He's not wrong. He's not lying.
No, I can believe it. I can believe it.
I came across you, Gary. I was cruising online. I surf college football constantly, and I think it was actually Parker Fleming was started posting these like net success ratios, and that
Yep.
led me over to Winning Cures Everything. And I gotta say that you guys are the most analytically sound and adept college football overview that I've ever seen. It's wild. You produce these weekly charts with I don't know 30 stats for each team and predictions, which is it's such great stuff to nerd out
Oh
on.
yeah. And that's the thing. I enjoy the nerding out process. The problem that you run into is you can't always quantify everything that goes into a football game, right?
Yeah.
There's no way to really quantify emotion or anything along those lines. A player's girlfriend breaking up with him a week before the ball game, that kind of stuff, right? So trying just nerding out on the numbers is one thing, but having Kyle Hunter on the Bet US show with us, like that guy won handicapper of the decade by Capper Review, and that is nuts because there are thousands and thousands of handicappers that they track, and he hits at a just absurd rate on everything, but he is the best at college football, and I don't know exactly how he does it. He doesn't use just formulas. Like he's got a set number that he goes with, but then he manually adjusts like every game based on, well, this is where they are in the schedule and this is what they face thus far and here's I mean, he's got all kind of stuff. But he's very very private with it. Like he doesn't want to share it the same way that Parker and I are like, "Hey, here's the success rate and here's the da 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 da." Da."
He's scouring Instagram to see who broke up with whom, make sure
Exactly.
like the girlfriends are still intact.
Oh, he's up at like 4 o'clock in the morning, just diving through everything, and I can't do it. I mean, I got kids, I got other jobs as well. I got other things that I got to do, so I can't dive in as deep as him. But this is his job. That's what he does.
Well, I actually want to dive in a little deeper. So a while back, we had the guys who do some of the testing for the NFL Combine on our podcast, and it was incredibly fascinating conversation about like how they're able to get analytics on things that maybe you wouldn't think were possible in the past. And so a second ago, you set something off in my mind and made a light bulb go off about there's things that you can measure and there's things that you can't measure when it comes to the football game. What what are the sources of data
that you guys use for the things you can measure? And then if you had a wish list for what you could measure but currently can't, or you had like a creative idea for how you could go get some of that data, what would it be?
Oh, that's a great question. So Parker gets all of his play-by-play data from Sports Info Solutions, right? And it's the same one that does what is it called? The broadcast links that go out, basically all the school official stats. So he gets all of the official data that would go out to every 134 FBS team.
So Parker is a data scientist, correct? That
Yes,
models all this stuff. Okay.
yes, that is correct. So he works for Sumer Sports, and they do all kinds of things on, I believe, the college and the NFL side. So
Okay.
they're all over the place. With me, it is just publicly accessible data, right?
Okay.
You can get information from collegefootballdata.com, and Bill does a great job over there. You can get it from teamrankings.com, has some good stuff as well. All these different stats as far as like sack rate, et cetera, et cetera, right? PFF does a good job with grades. I like to dive into some of those. Um, who else?
Is it Scholastic grades, or you mean like how they grade out as a
No,
player?
how they grade out as a player. Yeah, PFF does college stats basically.
We got a violation in process here.
Well, Gary, what do you wish you could have that you don't have right now?
What would I like to have? Man, all right, let me think. There were a couple earlier this year that I'm trying to think of. I wish I wish that it was easier to get sack to pressure or pressure to sack ratio on
Okay.
quarterbacks. But
Yeah.
not just quarterbacks. I want it for like the whole team. I want to see what the team stats are when it comes to that. But specific quarterbacks would be nice as well. That would be a really good one. For the other team as well. I want to know what the defense does as far as all right, how many pressures do you get compared to how many sacks you get?
Mhm.
Uh, and
Yeah.
really, if as long as you pressure the quarterback, then you're good. That's the main one that I would really like to know. Um, I want to be able to dive more into how many fumbles versus how many you lost, that kind of stuff. That way, you can kind of get a better idea of what your turnover luck has been. Because
Mhm.
if you're fumbling the ball all the time, but you only lose like 2% of them, then
Yeah.
at some point, there's got to be a regression to the mean. And I would like to, I would like more consistent stats with that as far as publicly accessible data.
See, I thought you were gonna go a different direction where you're gonna, like, have people flying drones over football practices to see who's hurt and who's not and all that kinda
No,
stuff, but no.
no, 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 no. I don't need to dive that deep. But I mean that for an actual professional handicapper, yes, stuff like that incredibly important. For me, I feel like okay, we know such and such starter is not going to play. Let's just say that the backup is worth 75% of what that starter was, and then we can go from there. That is one thing that I want to start diving into eventually
Yeah.
is player led ratings, right? Because right now it's all mostly stats based, and you've got your priors from the prior seasons and whatnot, but the priors are effectively worthless now in the transfer portal era. So I do want to, and here's the other problem that you get into. What are these players worth on one team compared to what they're worth on another team? And I don't know that you can quantify that either. At least until because you can look at what they've done in a backup role, but if they've been going against other backups, then maybe they're performing better than they actually would if they were a starter. It's some of the stats get real interesting really quick. So
And
I
this is why I love football or sports in general, because it's a microcosm for an entire organization which Cole and I work
right,
for, right? So it's like if you take one high performer on one team and put him onto a different team, you got a different sort of culture over there, or like climate anyway, different sort of leadership, a different sort of projects. And like if you do like analogous for say a football team, maybe a run first team versus a pass first team.
right.
Those are two different offenses, two different sort of mindsets, and that bleeds over into how you run your defense as well. And that same player may not perform. Uh, Caleb Williams. I think he's probably a coach killer if I have a hot opinion there.
I think that's the coach's fault, but that's
It's hard to defend what happened on Thanksgiving. Definitely.
yeah.
No,
Well,
it's very much the same in college basketball as well, right? College basketball is much more numbers oriented, and it's kind of the same with baseball as well. If you wanted me to really dive into the weeds, I would love to get more
Oh
college baseball data, because eventually, once college basketball is done, I'd like to dive more into the baseball side of it, but there's not a whole lot of publicly accessible data as far as that is concerned.
yeah, you got to fill up 7 hours a week of podcast talk. You better be hitting some baseball.
yeah.
Once the football season's done, I'm good with that. It's we just talk about storylines and whatever, and I don't have to do a bunch of the other shows that I do during the season. So it really, what all anybody really wants are just picks. Like
Yeah.
people just want picks on games, and
Tell me what to do.
yes, it's bland, but I get it. I mean, I enjoy hearing other people's picks as well. Like, all right, what are you thinking on this game? What do you think about this matchup? And really, you've only got like a week that you can use that information, and then you move on to the next. Right? It's just another data point, and we only get so many of these. There's only 12 regular season games for these teams, and it's an incredibly small sample size, but it's a lot of fun.
That's what I tell my girlfriend too. It's like I only got 12 weeks of this. What the hell?
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
I can't go to your friend's wedding.
exactly.
Who the hell schedules a fall wedding anyway?
Uh, there's not smart people, not people that want
Not in
to.
the South. Not in the
Yeah, not
South.
people that want people interested in the actual wedding, right? Like, I'll go to a fall wedding if it's on a not big weekend, but you can bet I'm gonna have my phone turned on and keep it up with what's happening.
But back to the numbers. Like you started bringing up some of them, like sack to pressure ratio, this sort of stuff. Like, what are some of the cooler stats or most predictive stats of which team is going to win the game?
So that Bill Connolly that works at ESPN, he used to work for Vox Media
Yeah.
back when they did football study hall, et cetera. He did the 5 factors, and from what I can tell, the 5 factors are still incredibly relevant nowadays. Even though we've gotten into more of explosive football, there's a lot of different ideas as far as tempo, et cetera, right?
Yeah.
But Bill Connolly did the 5 factors, and that is efficiency, explosiveness, field position, finishing drives, and turnovers. Right, and finishing drives.
Turnovers. Yeah.
Let's dive into each one. All right, efficiency. You're looking at like success rate. How good are you on a down to down basis? Uh, how many yards do you get on first down? How many yards do you get on 2nd and 6? Like, do you get half of what you need, et cetera? That's how success rate is measured.
This is what changed the way I look at football is net success ratios that Parker
Yes.
would publish. I was like, oh my god. Now I start watching football. It's like, okay, first down. He only made 3 yards. That's a negative for that net success ratio. Oh, we got a 9-yard gain. Oh, we're back on track.
Well, but see, that's the thing. Success rate is incredibly telling because it shows really how dominant you are in that football game. How good is your line of scrimmage
Yeah.
compared to theirs, et cetera. So the next one, explosiveness, that's where you really figure out the better teams, right? The ones that can be incredibly dominant because you're looking at yards per play, uh, points per play, all that kind of stuff as far as explosiveness is concerned. So
Yeah.
there's a couple of different ways that you can measure it. So inside of a football program, they look at it as an 8-yard run or a 12-yard pass. So those are not all,
Okay.
but that's basically what the majority of them do, from what I have been told. But you can also look at it as a 10-yard run and a 20-yard pass. And that's the one that I put out, you know, every Tuesday or Wednesday, whatever it was. That is based on a 10-yard run or a 20-yard pass and what percentage of your plays are explosive. So if you're not great on a success rate level, you can still be a really good football team if you are explosive. So explosive play rate is a huge thing. So you might not be good on a down to down basis, but if you can hit somebody over the top or if you can break runs out, then yes, you can still win
You get
football
these
games.
games every so often that are like a team just kind of struggles and struggles and they never like really get to midfield and then they just
Exactly.
like throw a bomb or like just like hit 60-yard plays. It's like you can't do anything for 3 downs. And then all of a sudden like the game is tied. And you're
Yeah.
like, what? You're pulling your hair out because they've never actually crossed midfield
Yes. That's
with
that's
possession.
100% right.
Played it
So
played it down across midfield. I'll put it that way.
well, and then what sets it up for issues is Scott, I know, Texas, I know, but Texas, they especially the latter half of the season, they've had trouble with finishing drives. So they are always
And why is that?
Why is that?
I think it has to do with Isaiah Bond going down, but I also think that Quinn Ewers is hurt. So it is what it is. But yes, and so if you are a team that can't finish drives, much the same, both of you, I would imagine, watch Texas and Georgia. Texas moved the ball between the 30s the whole day.
Yeah.
And they get down there and they only kick 2 field goals. Well, then one explosive play and boom, Georgia's got the lead. Right? So it's that kind of thing really can drive you nuts.
Is there another situation where Georgia kept fumbling the ball and just kept getting it back?
Yes.
Texas could never hop on the ball like you talked about.
Right? I'm glad you brought that up because that takes us over to the next one, which is field position. And field position it's affected a lot by turnovers, right? So yeah, you can have a really good kick return team. You can special teams, you can block kicks, and you can do all that. That can affect field position as well. Turnovers are your biggest thing. So how many times do you get interceptions, et cetera? How many times do you pin a team back? How good is your punter? Your kick return team? Do you consistently make them have to start at the 25, or do you kind of bait them into trying to bring the ball out? That kind of stuff, right? Field position's huge because if you were consistently starting at, Ohio is really good this year at it. James Madison just feasted on turnovers this year. And basically they would start at the opponent 45-yard line. Well, then you only got to go 45 yards to get a score. You got 15 yards and you're in field goal range. If you were consistently doing that, then obviously you're going to win more games than you lose because you're in a better position. And the other team is having to drive 70, 80 yards down the field just to be able to get to where they can score.
And this is how upsets happen too, right? Like where
Yes.
James Madison could take down Oregon, or whoever the
Yeah.
top team is, because if you fumble at your own 30-yard line consistently, it's going to be real tough.
Yes, it is incredibly difficult. The Nebraska-Iowa game this year, perfect example, right? Nebraska moved the ball all over them the whole ball game. In the last play of the game, they get sacked at their own 39 or 40-yard line, and Dylan Raiola drops the ball, and Iowa doesn't even have to really run a play. They can just go out and kick a really long field goal, and that's how they end up winning the game, right? So field position, they started at the opponent 40-yard line, and they just had to go out and kick a 57-yard field goal. So it just, it drives me nuts. The other two, finishing drives. Texas.
Yeah.
Texas is the poster child of this because last year they were terrible at it. This year, they started out really, really well.
Yeah, they started out great.
Ewers gets hurt. Isaiah Bond gets hurt. All of a sudden, you don't have that option when you get down there. I think Ewers still is dealing with, and I'm going blank. What's the injury that he's dealing with, Scott? Do you know?
He had an ankle injury recently and like an oblique muscle.
It's the oblique because he hasn't given that time to heal because it really should take anywhere from 4 to 6 weeks.
Yeah, he never got fully
Your throwing motion, everything. You're walking.
And basically, he doesn't have the same zip on the ball.
Yeah.
So the only passes that he's doing are the dink and dunk and back shoulder fades, like that kind of stuff, where he doesn't have to actually put something into it. You go back and watch exactly what they're doing, and he has points where he's really accurate. The beginning of the Texas-Georgia game,
he looked good.
He looked fantastic.
Yeah.
He was accurate. Everything was on, and then I feel like maybe the shot wore off, and it didn't look as good at the end of the ball game. So yeah, that stuff like where you can't finish drives, you get down inside when you have the whole field open to you, right? The whole field is wide open, and you can do all these. And Lane Kiffin is pretty crazy about this as well, where everybody just has all this room to find guys open.
Yeah.
But then you get down and the field shrinks, and you no longer have those open lanes. There are some coaches that do have issues with that.
And this is where Texas' top 2 running backs went down before the season even started. They're like supposed to be really good. So C.J. Baxter next year, look out for him. But without that threat, now you have like a really compressed field. Everything becomes much, much smaller.
When I think, to your point, I think that's why Kiffin prefers the mobile quarterbacks. So when the field gets smaller, that he has that dynamism. Because if you notice, at least from me watching, it doesn't seem like they do a lot of quarterback runs when they're between the 30s. But it's when they get in the red zone that they do a lot more of that.
Well, you're trying to steal yardage, basically.
Yeah.
So if nothing's open, take your gap. So yeah, I love those coaches as far as scheming and whatnot. But when you get down inside the red zone, it is, I mean, it's hit or miss, right? It's always hit or miss. And the last one is turnovers, and there's no real way to predict turnovers. I mean, you can kind of get a sense for it. I felt like I could predict them with who is it? Jalen Daniels from Kansas earlier this
Yeah.
year. Like the first 6 games of the season, it felt like, okay, here's the spot. This is where he's going to throw the pick, and he would always do it. But then the back half of the season, he never did. So, you know,
Well, those are the 3 things that I always thought it'd be neat if you could even if you could get a really small edge of predictive capacity could go a long way, would be predicting turnovers, predicting touchdowns on explosive plays, and predicting injuries. I think would be
Wow.
really, really interesting.
man, yeah, if you could predict injuries, there's a lot of people who make a lot of money.
Yeah.
I mean, certain players do show themselves as being more durable or less durable, but you kind of need them to be injured to even show that, right?
Right.
Like the Boise State running back, Genty,
Anti.
Yeah.
Yeah.
a freaking beast, a fucking beast. This guy like takes 30 carries a game. He hasn't gone down
It's
once.
insane. Like-
Yours, the past 3 years, he's gone down for at least a couple games every year. It's
Yes.
sort of like these.
Yeah.
Like always. He's always going down.
The Cowboys need to draft Anti. That's what we need because we're just hurting so bad.
But I'm sure they'll get somebody, but do they want to pay somebody in the first round for, and that's, I mean, obviously we can dive into this as well about how do you assess what a college player is worth? Because,
Yeah.
I mean, Genty is worth an absolute ton to Boise State, but how much would he be worth to
Yeah.
Ohio State? How much would he be worth to
Well,
Tennessee this year? You know, et cetera.
He's definitely worth a 3 seed in the playoffs. That's for sure.
All right.
Yeah.
All right, tell me this. Which direction do y'all want to go now? Do we want to talk playoffs or do we want to talk player revenue? You guys tell me. I'm guessing we're recording already, aren't we?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Good. I like the fact that like we would not be recording. Like this is all warm up.
Yeah.
I'm diving in. I'm explaining, blah blah blah, and then it's like, wait a minute. Do
We have an article later about player revenue and how much they're worth. So how about we
Okay.
go the playoff route? We'll save that other information for
I'm
later.
good with that. I'm totally good with that. And so I've got all the topics written down that you had sent over to me.
We don't even have to hit on any of them.
We can do
We just want to have
whatever.
a good conversation. But let's go the playoff route. So like here's my assessment of the playoffs. If you're going first round teams, Texas clearly has the easiest road all the way to the championship. I have no idea what you're going to do with like a Boise being in there at a 3 seed. I'll be honest, I don't stay up late enough to watch Oregon games, so I have not seen them play at all this year. I've not seen a single Oregon game. But what you were saying earlier about explosive plays, I don't feel like Georgia has any explosive plays. I like where do they like they just have a solid defense. I mean, Scott told me you're a Bama guy. They remind me a lot of just like a solid defense. And before Saban started getting quarterbacks, you remember that era?
Oh,
They
yeah.
just have like they don't have any explosive plays, but they just beat people through muscling them around.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like what are your thoughts on the playoff, Gary, and just what's going on there? And I do want to get to your question about playoff expansion too in a second.
So the question of did we get the right teams in the playoff?
Mm-hmm.
I think for the most part, yes, because really the whole thing is subjective, right? So what exactly are you looking for when you're on that playoff committee? And, with Alabama, it was, well, they had 3 losses or they had a really bad blowout loss to a 6-6 Oklahoma team. Or, with SMU, they didn't beat any good teams, but they never got embarrassed and et cetera,
Mhm.
right? So
They had a big comeback against Clemson. Yeah.
when you're trying to piece it together, it's like, okay, well, we want to represent as many conferences or as many regions as possible. And in the Southeast, you've already got Georgia, and we've got Tennessee, and we've got Texas. And now with the ACC, we got Clemson in, but we'd kind of like to have at least one other conference in this thing besides, so you've got Arizona State coming in, but that's really a Pac-12 team, if we're being honest. It's not a Big 12 team. SMU, maybe we can spin that off as a Big 12 team, right? I know they're in the ACC, but still, that's another team from Texas as opposed to just having the Longhorns because not everybody in
Yes,
Texas.
conference realignment is weird.
Oh,
Yes, we agree.
it's
Oh yeah, that's a
it's
different story.
bananas. Yes, indeed. So, yes, I think the playoff got it right for what it's supposed to be right now. Do I think it's going to be like that forever? No, not even close. And then I think it's going to get changed sooner rather than later. And if you would like, we can dive into that as well. So, which direction would you like to take it as far as expansion, or do we want to talk more about this playoff right now?
Well, let's just talk about the playoffs in general,
Okay.
perhaps. I think it's clear that the SEC and Big Ten tried to finagle a way to get buys for their teams, right? But what they did not count on is that Boise State and the Big 12 may sneak in there, or at least Boise State in particular.
Right.
Is
Well, we were
so
not that far from having like an AAC team.
no, absolutely not. Um, do I think there's to your point? I think there's an element of echo finale where yes, as opposed to last year where Florida State got left out fairly unfairly, however you feel about that. But now we have the expanded
Completely
playoff.
fairly, they didn't deserve it.
They didn't. Their quarterback was awful. That played against Louisville in that championship game last year. It was just a nightmare to watch.
Even if their quarterback had been healthy, the schedule was
Oh,
atrocious. I mean, they were what, number 55 in the. I mean, it was
Yeah.
what it was. Anyway, continue.
if I had a magic wand though, and I could just revamp the entire playoffs, 64 teams. Hear me out. No, I kid.
Got the Mike Leach thing going on.
16 teams, BCS rankings, no automatic bids. Just seed them 1 through 16 and let them go at it. And I'll also have a additional thought. An NIT tournament. The remaining 16 teams will go
I'm
through a
good with
second
that.
tournament to get everyone involved.
I'm good with that. I like that idea. Um, so here is the way that I believe it's going to move to 16. I think it's going to move to 16. Now, the Big Ten and the SEC basically govern the whole thing now, and that's
Mhm.
effectively why they had to move to this iteration of it,
Yeah.
because they had to have everybody on board the last time. Now they don't have to have everybody on board. They decide what they want to do. And that's why when they do the look-in clause next year, they're just going to kind of tell everybody, hey, this is the direction we're going. And this is what it's going to be like from now on. They're going to change up what it takes to get in, et cetera. Josh Pate, I don't know if you guys watch him, but he talks to a lot more people than I do.
Mhm.
And his thought process was, we're going to change up conference championship weekend. And we're going to set it to where each conference gets a certain number of automatic bids. You
Okay.
still have to have the G5 get in there. You still have to have wild cards and that kind of stuff so that other people have a chance to get in. So if you're doing 16, you could do 4 from the SEC, 4 from the Big 10, 2 from the ACC, 2 from the Big 12, and so forth and so on. And then the rest would be wild cards, or 1 G5 and so forth, because you want to avoid litigation as long as humanly possible until everybody splits, right?
I mean,
Uh,
Big 12 very well could have been left out this year.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, if things just fell just a little bit different.
Which is nuts to me because Arizona State had a better resume than SMU. I mean, it just
Scatterboo's a problem for
yes,
sure.
Yeah.
yes, and Sam Levitt's good, like really, really good. So
Yeah.
Dillingham did an awesome job with that bunch. But regardless, eh, if there is a way for you to win your way into this thing, then I think everybody's going to be pretty happy, especially if you got more wild card spots open, et cetera. If the SEC and the Big Ten move to 4 automatic bids, or even if it's just 3, but if you
Mhm.
move to 4, then you reshape conference championship weekend to where the conference champions don't actually play.
Yeah, you're gonna have guys sitting out of conference championship games, or even teams potentially sitting out, which just
Right.
seems crazy.
Well,
It-
Texas and Georgia really like what they have done when they went over and started paying, 18, 19, 20-year-olds. Who cares about the conference championship now? When you've got
Mhm.
coaches like Lane Kiffin going
Yeah.
out and saying, we've all been talking about this, and we don't even know if it's really worth it for us to play in the championship game. We just want to
Yep.
get to the playoff. But then you got to decide whether or not the kids that are on the team actually care about the playoff, because you've got a lot of guys that are opting out that are transferring that don't even care to play in the playoff, which is
Penn
but that's
State's quarterback, yeah,
oh,
backup quarterback.
yeah, the backup quarterback. He had his own packages and whatnot. Like he was getting into the game, but either way, I'm not saying that everybody doesn't care about the playoffs,
Yeah.
but still. Um, so yeah, when you look at the conference championship weekends, if your number one versus number two are already going to be in the playoff anyway, why have them play another game? Instead, if you've got a 16 team bracket, then you've got 1 versus 16, 2 versus 15, blah 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 blah. Have that be your bye weekend for the 1 and 2 seed in the SEC and the Big 10, and then the 3 versus 6 and the 4 versus 5 end up playing each other in the SEC standings. And that way you are guaranteed a spot. You can win your way in even if you are the number 3 team in the SEC or the number 6 team in the SEC. So this year, like South Carolina could have played against Tennessee or Alabama or whatever,
Mhm.
right? You could have, and yes, we did see some of those matchups already. But I mean, could you imagine on championship weekend what an
Oh,
Alabama versus Ole Miss game would have done to get into the playoff?
yeah.
It'd be nuts,
Yeah.
absolutely nuts.
So, and it's more inventory, which is this is what they all want anyway.
Yeah.
Like they want more. So you're creating 2 football games instead of just 1 championship game that the championship game doesn't really have that much stakes. Like I still think the conference championship matters, but it was not that long ago when we just decided it on the field. Like whoever had the best conference record through the season, regardless of strength of schedule, et cetera, before Roy
No
Kramer
championship
decided to
game.
package it all up and sell it for a conference championship game. But and that was what, like the late 80s, early 90s.
Well, the conference has gotten so big that the schedules are imbalanced now. I
Yeah.
mean, it's other than, like, the way the bowls used to be, where, like, 1 would play 5 and 2 would play 13 and be like, "Well, we'll figure it out with votes of
Yeah.
who actually won."
And that's the way that this works. Like Indiana looked like a really good team all year, right? And but they will get a chance to prove it tonight, actually.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
That's such a burn. You're like, they looked like a good team. They weren't actually a good
they
team.
were a good team.
Yeah.
But the only time we saw them against another team that is equivalent to them or had better talent,
Mm-hmm.
they got destroyed.
I got
They did,
smoked.
didn't they?
So
Well, I mean, like, on that front, what based on the stats, what was the biggest upset of the year?
I wrote this down. Okay,
Yeah.
so the as far as so I did this based on point spread, right?
Okay.
So you're looking for what
Yeah.
was the most unexpected, whatever, like how crazy was this? The biggest one was Northern Illinois over Notre Dame. I'm
Oh,
glad
Heck
you brought that
yeah.
up because Notre
good
Dame's playing
stuff.
Indiana tonight, right? So that was 27 and a half points. It should have never been close, but honestly, Northern Illinois kind of dominated that game.
They
They
did.
outgained them. They had a better
Yep.
success rate. I mean, everything was, and that was back when Northern Illinois was healthy before they got beat up. The next one, I've got the top 5 if you would like.
Yeah,
Yeah.
let's do it.
Georgia State plus 23 against Texas State. Georgia State ended up winning that game by 8,
Oh, wow.
and that was it.
Lord.
Texas State was kind of. Do you guys know anything about GJ Kinney?
No.
Isn't he he's like a Mike Leach descendant, maybe?
Yeah, kind of the air raid kind of
Yeah.
thing. Now they don't run the exact same
Yeah.
thing, but he's a descendant of that tree. He was the coach at Incarnate Word. He
Okay.
took over at Texas State, took them to their first bowl game last year. This year they kind of had some dark horse playoff talk going with them because they brought in Jordan McLeod, who was the quarterback at James Madison last year, and
Mhm.
everybody thought that he would kind of just slide in. He'll be a better fit for this offense than TJ Finley and whoever else was last year, and blah blah blah. Texas State was not as good this year, but their offense is still legit. The problem
Mhm.
is that some games is really good and some games is really not, and you never know when that's going to happen. So,
Variance is an issue.
let's see. The next one that we had up, Vanderbilt plus 21.5 against Alabama.
Yeah.
And
Oh,
oh yeah, that was a big one. And hey, the schedule sets up the exact same next year. Now it'll be in Tuscaloosa, but it's the week after Alabama plays Georgia. Bama's going to Athens. They come back home and they have to deal with Vanderbilt. This year, Vandy was coming off a bye. Alabama, of course, coming off a big win over Georgia. We'll see exactly what that looks like now that Diego Papia has won his injunction against the NCAA. So The number 4 one was Michigan plus 19.5 against Ohio State.
Oh wow, yeah, I didn't even think about that.
I mean, talk about like the that's the big.
Yeah,
I mean, like not on paper, but that
that
was
was
the
the
biggest
shocker.
upset of the year. That was
That was
the shocker.
I could not believe that happened.
No.
But that's the things that you cannot quantify, right? That's the
Mhm.
kind of stuff that
Yeah.
we were talking about.
Yep.
Ohio State, for whatever reason, cannot get out of their own way against that team. They have to. It's like the coaching staff was like, we have to win this game a certain way.
Mm-hmm.
And when you go back and watch the tape, like, because you can even go through just like the YouTube TV quick plays or key plays, whatever it's called. And if you watch, it looked like there were running lanes that were open,
Mhm.
but Michigan was able to shut them down. So it looked like they were in the right play calls. But the problem is they continued to try to run the ball against really an NFL defensive line.
Mhm.
When you've got wide receivers like that, why would you not try and throw it a little more often, especially when the secondary for Michigan is certainly questionable and they didn't have Will Johnson and all that? It drove me nuts, and I'm not even an Ohio State fan. Like, I
I
cannot
am.
imagine what those Buckeyes fans were thinking.
Oh, I'm here for every time Ohio State loses. I'm here for it. I'm good.
This
I
is
can
what
believe it.
Texas used to do against Oklahoma for years and years and years, where I have this overarching theory of college football that the team that desperately wants that game is going to lose it.
Yeah.
A&M did it against Texas. Texas used to do it against OU. And if you're too hyped up, you're not going to perform. But this is a
Yeah.
little bit different animal where Ryan Day wanted to prove that he could run the ball for whatever fucking reason. No idea.
You know what I don't understand? Why is there no other stadium in the country that is haunted the same way that Jordan-Hare Stadium is in Auburn? Why?
Well,
The grave digger.
Nobody else has a haunted stadium. Why does Auburn get to have it?
I mean, I think
Just
you know. It's the Auburn people.
That's yeah.
Yeah.
No, they what do they do? They built the stadium on like a ancient Indian burial ground or whatever it
Yeah.
was. Like,
Like
at least that was
cursed.
a rumor for a long time.
Yeah.
Frustrating.
What's the last one here?
The
What do we
last
got?
one was Wyoming plus 18.5 against Washington State. So that new Oklahoma quarterback, John Mateer,
Oh, yeah.
Wyoming beat them 15-14 towards the end of the season.
Oh wow.
Interesting. Yeah,
No.
Ben Arbuckle, the offensive coordinator for now Oklahoma. Arbuckle, I love Arbuckle, but it seemed like that whole team had just completely checked out at the end of the season. Because there was a point Washington State was like 8-1, 9-1, 8-1,
Mhm. Both
and
them and Oregon State,
yeah,
somehow we're cleaning up even though the Pac-12 was imploding, or the
exactly.
Pac-2 or whatever you wanna call it now. But, Jordan, we do a few different segments on the podcast, one of which is called the Confusion Matrix. Do you wanna join us in the Confusion Matrix?
Hey, let's try it out. I'm game for anything, fellas.
The Confusion Matrix. Real quick, we wanted to say thanks again to One Model, the AI and people analytics pioneer, for sponsoring the episode. And now back to the Confusion Matrix.
Absolutely. Okay, this is I'm going to provide you with some controversial points. You react to them, and if Cole likes your answer, he will provide you with a social media tile that you can share with your friends and family online. Okay, here we go. College football rankings are simply a Ponzi scheme. So what I mean by this is that at the beginning of the year, say like number 8 LSU will beat number 5 Tennessee, made up rankings, and they just switch those rankings. Are either of them that good? Who knows? The next week, South Carolina beats Tennessee. They just switch those rankings, and they just swap these rankings, and we never really know how good these teams are until they finally fall out of the top 25.
That's an interesting way to look at it. Yeah, I'll go with that. Sure, why not?
Yeah. Well, one of the things I've appreciated about you so far, Gary, is you've been peppering us with some G5 references, which I love as a Louisiana Tech fan. So, like, I can tell you're not just like the rich getting richer and the poor getting poorer kind of guy in terms of college football. You appreciate the love of the sport. I
I
love
do. I
that.
do.
He
It's
does.
the pageantry, the tradition, all of it, and it is just as big for the people in Boone, North Carolina, with App State, as it is in Statesboro, Georgia, as it is in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. It's all everybody loves college football. There just happen to be more people watching it whenever the Big Ten and the SEC play.
Yeah.
Like that's so
The
you got to
new
find that nice balance somewhere.
Do you think it'll be the new AFC and NFC eventually? Like they'll just break off and create their own, or what's going to happen there?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Absolutely. Because they don't play the same sport. That's not to say that, Louisiana Tech couldn't end up upsetting whoever from the SEC or whatever at some point, right? Because we've seen it. I was in the not the Liberty Bowl. I was in Legion Field in
Mhm.
1998.
9.
9.
Yeah.
Yes. When I had to sit and watch that Hail Mary pass at the end of the game. Very frustrating. Very, very frustrating. So yeah, you knew all about that. I didn't even have to bring it up.
Yeah,
And
I was there with you right before you even got it out of your mouth.
Oh, I watched Alabama beat East Carolina 23-22 in like the mid 90s,
Oh my
Mhm.
and I
god.
was so frustrated. But yeah, I've been through the whole gamut. So when everybody calls me a Bama fan, I'm legit a Bama guy. Like I always have been, always will be, and it's not because of Nick Saban. It's because my dad went to school there, and my grandmother went to school there, and my aunt and uncle, and blah blah, the whole blah blah blah. So
It's
yeah,
because all the Bear Bryant descendants that disappointed you before Nick Saban. That's why.
exactly, exactly. The first one that I remember watching was Ray Perkins as the coach,
Mhm.
and just frustrating. So I was born the same year that Bear Bryant died, 16 days before he died.
Well, I mean, like maybe it's incarnation. I mean,
It might be, except I can't coach a lick, man. I can't do any of that stuff.
well, I mean, like everyone hates a loss, but I think everyone loves a win. Whether you're in Wyoming or Arizona, rushing the field, we don't do it enough. We don't do it enough.
Well, I think Vandy is the one who started the trend this year because it seemed like everybody did it every week after that. But like
Yeah.
Vandy was the first one when they beat you guys.
No, didn't Arkansas do it against Tennessee?
Maybe.
Surely.
Yeah.
Everybody remembers the one with Vanderbilt, but that's only because there was only like a third of their stadium that had Vanderbilt fans.
Yeah.
It was nothing but Alabama fans.
Here's a bonus one. Breakaway goalposts are absolute trash. Like no, we got to tear down the goalposts. We can't.
Okay, and now you're speaking from like a true fan perspective, right? Just pure passion. When you start getting into legal logistics,
No,
yeah.
that's a different story.
To answer the other question, to go along with your, yeah, I think we should probably rush the field more.
Yeah.
It's fun. Like, and I think that when you're in college, especially with some of the students, probably need to go out and have more fun.
I mean, you
Yeah.
should really build like a river or a lake outside your stadium just so you can throw a goalpost in it
Yes.
eventually. You got to do
Yes.
it. Okay, check this one out. Every college football rule is better than the NFL rule. I'm talking overtime, 1 foot in, even how wide the hash marks are, 15-yard pass interference. I think every rule in college football is better than the pros.
I'll disagree on one.
Okay.
One is the pass interference rule where they place it at the spot of the foul versus 15 yards. I prefer the NFL rule on that. Just because
Wow.
it incentivizes people to, pass interference when they're 40 yards down the field.
I prefer the college rule because if you have a really bad matchup, you don't want the team to just throw the ball down the field and consistently, get 60 yards or whatever, right? So
Yeah.
I prefer the college rule on that.
Okay.
I'm trying to think of the overtime rules and whether or not I like what they're currently doing in college.
I do miss the previous when A&M played LSU to
Yeah.
7 full overtimes. That was amazing. Now it's a little bit watered down.
Yeah.
I will say on the opposite side of offensive pass interference being 15 yards seems awful in college. Check this one out.
If you fumble the ball anywhere else on the field
Mm-hmm.
and it gets recovered by your team, by the offense,
Yep.
they move it back to where the ball was originally fumbled.
Mm-hmm.
Why is it that if somebody fumbles the ball through the end zone,
Out of the back of the end zone. Yep.
why is that not brought back to where the ball was fumbled?
Louisiana Tech versus Kansas in 2013. Ryan Higgins fumbles the ball out of the back of the end zone, and they would have beat them. And it still drives me nuts to this day. It was in the fourth quarter, And I'm sure that there's many other references, but that's the one that stings the most with me.
I can believe it.
It's overly punitive, but I love it. I love it. You got to be ball security, baby.
That's yeah.
Ball
I mean,
security.
if you want to specify that, if you want to really emphasize ball security, then yeah. But I don't understand why the ball or why the rule is different in the middle of the field as opposed to once you get down there.
I have a bunch. But I'll just end on this one. The Waterboy is the best college football movie, or best football movie. I'll back it up even.
Hey, I'll go with that. I love some Bobby Boucher.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I'm all in on that. So
Right.
I enjoy watching that. I can toss that on anytime. So yes, I'll agree with that one.
Yeah. I'm trying to think is NFL one, but what's the one with Al Pacino?
Uh, uh,
Titans.
No.
every given Sunday.
Yeah,
Every
every
Given
given
Sunday.
Sunday. That's
Yeah.
probably my favorite football movie.
It's really good. Very
Yeah.
serious though.
Yeah.
I need some comedy. I need something to laugh.
Ryan Gosling was an absolute liability in Remember the Titans. He was awful.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
You gotta look out for him, man.
Did y'all ever see the TV show Blue Mountain State?
I saw a few episodes of it. Yeah,
Oh, classic.
little guy humor there.
Wasn't
Yes.
it like loosely based on Boise State too? I think it is.
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was.
Yeah.
So, but there were several college football reporters that made little pop-up cameos in that and whatnot. So I think college football fans just wanted something in the entertainment industry that they could latch on to.
Well, we're gonna get back to some analytics here. We're gonna let's do our next segment is called the nerdery, Gary. The nerdery. And the first one I wanted to start with is for you, Scott, about the revenue per quality college football recruit. You want to hit us with that?
Yeah. So this is get back to how much is a player worth, and this is a study in 2020 by some folks at Ohio State. So think back. This is pre-COVID, so pre hyperinflation, pre-NIL, pre a lot of things. But they set out to understand how much is a player worth to a team, and a couple of important things here. So team performance easily measured through just wins and bowl appearances, that sort of stuff, and you can obviously quantify financial data. What is important is that Rivals.com will rate every player on a 5-point scale, 5 stars down to actually 2 stars. And these are consistent over time, so you can measure it over time. What they did is they essentially had a regression analysis, so random effects regression analysis to understand how these players relate to overall wins and the money associated with that. And what they found is 5-star players are worth 0.31 wins per year. 4-star players are worth about 0.06 wins per year. So you get about 5 times the impact from 5-star to 4-star. 2-star players are actually reduced the win percentage by a little bit overall. So for each, so I'm going to hit you with a bunch of numbers here. The overall monetary value for a win for a school is about $830,000, right? This is for one win. So if you multiply this out, a 5-star player is worth about $650,000 in increased revenue for the school. A 4-star player is worth about $150,000 extra revenue per year. And a 2-star player actually reduces annual revenue by about $13,000. There's a lot wrong with this study. It doesn't control for like conferences and the sort of stars that come in to these different teams, but kind of an interesting way to quantify the impact of football players and how they can impact the team.
Yeah. I think it especially hurts with Texas A&M's recruiting classes where they get a bunch of 5 stars and pay a bunch of money and then they all leave before they ever see the field.
Yeah.
That has to hurt a lot. But I thought the interesting thing to me with that $650,000 kind of number is I keep wondering with the NIL is when is it going to get to there's going to be like an expected value of a player and that's how much they get paid. And it sounds like that expected value should be about $650,000 for a 5-star. And so these guys that are 5 stars that are getting $2 million, $3 million, $10 million, that I think is going to turn into a bad investment at some point. Am I thinking about that right, Gary?
Well, you got to look at it the same way as you would in the NFL at this point, because a quarterback would absolutely be worth $2 million. But Is a left guard that's a 5-star worth $2 million? Probably not. And you're probably not going to see any guards on your
Yeah.
offensive line getting that much money. The positions of importance, your edge rushers, your wide receivers, your, as far as explosive plays, et cetera, things that can really change the outcome of a ball game. Those are the ones that are going to end up getting the most money. But it changes things as far as you just need good overall depth. There was an article at CNBC yesterday, 2 days ago. No, yesterday. Jason Belzer put it out, and it goes through the top 10 most valuable college athletic programs. So, Scott, you were talking about this was done at Ohio State back in 2020, right?
Right.
Well, a lot has changed since 2020.
Yeah,
So I wonder if a
absolutely.
win is actually worth more now. The the most the top 10 most valuable college athletic programs, Ohio State is worth 1.3 billion with a B. That is, I mean, we're talking about NFL properties at this point.
Sure.
If that's the case, exactly how much are those wins worth to them as opposed to somebody else? Like Northwestern is, I would imagine, pretty far down the list. But
Yeah, and I don't recall if they. I think this is all D1, but once again, to your point, San Diego State not the same sort of realm as or ULM, not the same sort
right,
of payout to the bowls that Ohio State's going to get, Michigan's
exactly.
going to get.
And when it comes to playing there, like a player that plays for Ohio State, I would imagine is probably worth more
Yeah.
than a player that play. And this goes into NIL. This goes into how much is a win worth. Like a win over a nobody program for Ohio State is worth nothing, but a win over a nobody program for Vanderbilt is worth a ton because
Mm.
then Vanderbilt can get to bowl games and they can. Diego Pavia won 6 games this year, and he's talking about $1 million deal with Vanderbilt.
That feels light. That feels super light.
It probably so.
But to Cole's point, is this sustainable? Like, there's
No,
only so many billionaire, boosters out there.
no, no,
Yeah.
Cole. This is not sustainable whatsoever. This market is going to crash. Like it's
Well, do you? I mean, this gets into an area that we're really getting ahead of our skis. But do you think they'll ever have like a players' union like they do in the professional sports if they ever classify them as employees?
yes, if
Yeah,
they ever get classified as employees, though, and
yeah,
that's they don't want that. I say they, the powers that be, don't
Yeah.
want that. At this point, I could care less. I'm so tired of it.
Yeah, I hear that. I think think about like back several years ago, where these players would put in all this effort and they get a scholarship. Now, there's some value to that, but not when you go to the bookstore and see all your jerseys and you go on TV and ESPN's got the ads running with you and you're like,
Oh
what
yeah,
the hell, man? Like everyone's making money off my name, but I'm not, which is where this whole what's his name? Steve Bannon, the one that really kind of blew things up.
no, Ed O'Bannon.
Ed O'Bannon.
Steve
Ed
Bannon's
O'Bannon.
yeah.
the
Steve
MAGA
Bannon's
guy
the
or
guy with a
whatever.
bunch of moles on his face.
Well, maybe him too. We'll just lump all the Bannons in together. That really blew this whole thing up, and like it does feel right for players to get some sort of compensation besides, hey, have some free Nikes and
Well, when it started, that's what it was, right?
yeah,
When you look at DJ Uiagalelei back in 2020 and then Bryce Young in 2021 or whatever, like when NIL first started, it really was supposed to be if you play really well and you become a name in this sport, you can get paid for doing advertising and whatever. It was never supposed to be pay for play. Like we're calling it NIL. This is not NIL. It's all pay for play.
Yeah.
That's really all this stuff is because
Well,
it's
it just took everything that was below the table and made it above table. Is the way I look at it.
yeah.
well,
Oh,
Right.
absolutely.
players got really screwed too. You think like Des Bryant? I think he took like a cheseburger from
Yes.
a coach or I can't remember who. I can't remember the exact story, but he took a cheeseburger and the NCAA is like, well, you can't play this year.
Well, the reason he couldn't play is because he got
He
nervous
lied.
and he lied about it,
Yeah.
but they had proof and he kept saying, "No, no, I didn't do anything." And yeah.
That's Nicole Napper defense.
Oh yeah. It's why Bruce Pearl isn't the coach in Tennessee anymore.
Yeah.
Cover up's always worse. Just don't lie about it. If they got proof, come on, man.
All right, let's hit you with the next one. about engineering professors make
Oh, you're gonna
helmet
go with this one.
inserts.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, this is a short video, and, engineering professor makes helmet insert. So you've ever seen the players on the field, it's all loud, and they, like, just kinda put their, hands over their ear holes so that they can, actually hear the radio signal come into their helmet and understand the plays. Well, this engineering professor at Michigan State University is like, "Yeah, I can just essentially 3D print ear hole covers." Before that, they were using duct tape, which, I mean, this feels over-engineered already, and, I don't know, how much crowd noise is, Michigan State actually hearing?
Oh,
Shots fired, shots fired.
Wasn't a lot this year.
yeah.
Maybe next year.
Well, I mean, like, it's helmet technology, and it's, uniform technology. If you go back and look at I'm a Texas guy, clearly, I'll see, like, Ricky Williams highlights when he broke the record in 1998. The helmets look crazy, the shoulder pads are, like, 8 feet
Oh, yeah.
wide, like, now
Yeah.
everyone's kinda slimmed down, you can definitely tell.
My linebackers had the neck brace, like the neck
Oh, the
big
dookie
thing.
roll? Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that was
That's the good
badass.
stuff.
Back when everybody was on steroids, like, it was
Yep.
it was a different era. It's so funny when you see the guys from that era who were just giant, like the Boz,
Oh, yeah.
Brian
Bosworth.
Bosworth, and like, now he's in commercials, and he's like he may be
Uh
220 now, and he's clearly playing well above 250 back in those days.
Oh, yeah.
Well, have y'all seen, like, this is a total tangent, but I can't remember what it's called. Perhaps Greg, you can tell me. But it looks like a sports bra, but it contains all sorts of a metric recording device, and it can tell you
Huh.
how fast the player's running down the field,
Yeah, all the GPS stuff. Yeah.
their shift speed and this sort of stuff. And someone was saying the other day, it's like, well, yeah, you can go to the combine and watch someone at the field in Indianapolis run a 40-yard dash, and it's a 4.2, whatever. That's great. But I know that Ashton Genty, he ran 22 miles per hour on this one play. That's all I really need to know. I don't need to know these sort of proxy metrics.
Yeah. It's the NFL Combine is the underwear Olympics. I mean,
Yeah.
that's all it is. It's none of it necessarily really matters because now you have every bit of data that you could possibly need just from the game data. So you want to see what they're actually like when they're playing? That's how you do it because it's a completely different environment in Indianapolis.
Well, let me hit you with I was going to do a different nerdy article, but I just want to hear from your perspective. Why is Louisiana Tech in a bowl game this year? They're 5-7, and what happened to make that happen? And I'm assuming, Gary, that you know.
And so I did some digging into it. Louisiana Tech is on the quarter system instead of the 2 semester system. So they
Mhm.
still had all of their players on campus. That certainly helped out because Louisiana Tech's APR was nowhere
Boom.
close to what it should be for a 5-7 team to get that invitation.
Well, Cole and I graduated, so I mean.
Air Force was the other option
Mhm.
because everybody else. This happened 2 weeks after the last game of the season.
Yeah, it's because Marshall fired their coach, and then the
Yes,
whole team, went in the transfer portal. I think it was over 35 players, and they're like, "We can't even fill it a team anymore." And so, yeah, like they just dropped out.
the crazy thing was the Independence Bowl had double checked with them and with the Sun Belt Conference, and
Mhm.
Marshall and the Sun Belt had told them numerous times, "We're good. We're going to be there. It's no problem." And the day of the Army Navy game is when they said, you know what? We don't want to have anything to do with this. Like we don't have a quarterback. We don't have, we've got entire position groups that are not going to be here. So we're like, we don't want to have to play our wide receivers at offensive line. We'd prefer not to do that against Army. So yeah, and it
Oh,
makes sense. Army being the team that was still there, they had some say in who was going to be the opponent. And when they brought up Air Force, Army effectively said, "No, we don't want to mess with the Commander in Chief trophy. We don't. No, we're not doing that. We're not playing them again. We already did that."
fair enough.
So after that, you start looking through all the other 5-7 teams and their APRs and whatnot, and you quickly realize none of these players are still on campus. None of them are going to want to agree to play against this Army team, and they don't want to be in Shreveport the day after or 2 days after Christmas or whatever it is.
Yeah,
So,
it's the
Yeah.
28th.
so Louisiana Tech being right down the street and the fact that they're on the quarter system kind of kind of made it an easy solution, I think.
And it kept ULM from getting in, which is
That's true.
just so beautiful.
That's true.
Yeah. Well, Gary, it's been fantastic having you on the podcast today. Before I give you the final word, Scott, any final words for Gary?
Yeah, I got 2 questions. One, do you have a way too early prediction for 2025 football season?
No, I have no idea. Like
Who knows?
we're still in the middle of this portal situation, and I can imagine Oregon is going to be good. Ole Miss is going to buy a bunch of football players. Auburn has emptied the clip on football players this season, so I would imagine that Hugh Freeze gets a little bit better next year. As far as who's going to win a national championship, but when I, no idea.
Is Arch going to win the Heisman?
It's Arch going to be at Texas.
Oh.
Ooh,
We got to see all kind of things, right?
Is
Yeah.
Louisiana Tech going to win the national championship?
they are not. They are not.
That would be
anywhere
a
near close.
that would be a negative.
Yeah.
A
Will
lot of things
Louisiana
gotta
Tech
go
win
right.
another bowl game?
Yeah,
Might be
maybe.
better.
Gary, I love the pod. I love the Twitter. How can folks get in contact with you if they want to reach out?
The Twitter or X or whatever you want to call it, at
Yeah.
Gary WCE. It's very easy. WinningCuresEverything.com as well as where you can find me. Or, of course, the Bet US College Football Show. We do it every Tuesday and Wednesday at 1 p.m. Eastern. But over Christmas, over New Year's, we're going to be doing Monday shows those weeks because I ain't working on Christmas. So
Yeah, fair enough.
I got kids. I can't do that. But yes, we'll be doing the Monday show, 1 p.m. Eastern on the Bet US College Football Show.
Awesome. Well, you've been listening to Directionally Correct, a People Analytics podcast with Cole and Scott, and today's guest, Gary Segars from Winning Cures Everything. Thanks for joining us, Gary.
Anytime. Enjoyed it.
Directionally Correct is dedicated to you, our listeners, to help educate and entertain you on how to effectively do people analytics. By supporting this podcast, you are helping us continue to provide valuable insights and knowledge to our listeners. Please consider becoming a patron of the podcast. You can find the link to sign up in the show notes or at patron.podbean.com/directionallycorrect. Thanks for your support.